Welcome to another episode of the Pineapple Perspective with your host, Troy Hooper. That's me. I'm Troy Hooper. This is sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. And today, as always, I'm very honored and happy to have another phenomenal guest. I'm just so fortunate to have these great relationships in the industry that give me the opportunity to invite really knowledgeable, experienced, and in this case, a pleasant gentleman to the show. Carl Orsbourn is expert in not only technologies in our industry, but coming from retail and convenience, he has a plethora of knowledge that we can tap into during our conversation across the spectrum of food and beverage in many different venue types. But he's known really as an expert in the digital evolution and revolution of the food and beverage industry, having written in co-authored two books with Meredith Sandlin about the topic. So lots to talk about. Carl, thanks for being here.
Sure, it's a pleasure. Nice to see you again, sir. You keeping well?
Nice to see you. Welcome home. We were both in Asia separately, and it's getting to be the fall and holiday season. Good weather here in California, so glad to be with you and get started on this conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I'm glad you had a good trip.
Carl, we start every show the same because it matters. And the thesis of the show is that every business should be in the hospitality business. We all serve people in one way or another. Our customers are always humans. And so we like to sort of level set the show and start the conversation by asking you, what does hospitality mean to you?
Wow, what a great question. And you're so true. I mean, I know it's a term that gets used a lot in the restaurant environment, but it is something that is applicable in every environment. And I think it's no reason, no surprise, I'd say, as to why so many people start off in restaurants or in retail where hospitality and guest relations is so important, and they take the principles of that and put it into whatever industry they move into next. For me, I'll draw on an experience from my childhood, if I may, and that is my parents were great friends with these two Italian this Italian couple that ran a restaurant in London, and they took us to their restaurant many times, and the feeling of hospitality was so true because they made us feel like we were at home. And I guess that's the best way of me trying to represent hospitality. If you can make people feel comfortable in the sense that you feel known, you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and then you have a pleasant experience. That for me is everything that could apply, not just in the settings that we're going to talk about today, but in every walk of life. And so I think hospitality is about feeling like you're at home.
Yep. I think that's a good observation. You wove in the second part of my question is usually where does that come from? But you evoked and called back to your childhood, which, many folks that come on the show and that I talk to about this topic, we all have had that foundational experience, right? Whatever that was. And in your case, it was going to a family Italian restaurant. And boy, do the Italians know how to make you feel like at home. Every Sunday, the entire family comes over in an Italian household, right? Nona makes the pasta and everybody chips in. But I
It's so
think
true.
that's a good callback. I appreciate that you make that connection though to the business or any world, right? Where no matter what you do, you can make people feel seen and heard. You can make people feel welcome. You can make them feel important and listened to. So I think that's a really good call out. Appreciate that.
One of the things, Troy, that really resonates with me about that is they took us to the shores of Lake Como in northern Italy, and we stayed with their extended family in a bed and breakfast. Didn't speak a word of English, any of them, and you're just around this table, and you're just seeing that sense of being literally in their home, but also just that spirit. And of course, the hospitality experience there would last for 4 or 5 hours for an evening, and I was 13, 14, just seeing this come to life. And so yeah, I think my love for restaurants very much came from that.
Yeah, I love that. I think the opportunity to have this sort of ethnic or international exposure. I grew up in the Cuban community in Miami, and it was purely Cuban until later in the '80s, early '90s. But similarly, I was fed by my neighbors probably 3 or 4 nights out of every week. Like it just was. If you were there, you were getting fed. If you were there, there was nothing you would want for. The guest would be given more love and attention than the family members usually. So family members are like, "Hey, go get it yourself. Hey, what do you want? I want to serve you." So I think that is more commonly true when mixing cultures, and we'll talk about our experiences in Japan, particularly later. Carl, let's talk a little bit about your history. Let's give people a little bit of an understanding because you've had a diverse history, but you've really kept your finger on the pulse of hospitality in one way or another. Give us a quick rundown just as we get ready to talk about some topics of the day so that the audience has a little context of where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's a bit of a crazy history. I spent 18 years in a blue chip organization, BP, largely in the convenience retail sector. So doing a variety of different roles, both in the UK and over here in California, strategy, operations, pricing, finance, a whole range of different things. That led to me running a 1,000-unit chain over here on the West Coast, across the Pac 7 states, fully franchised. So a lot of franchising experience in that. But of course, a retail environment, small formats, relatively similar. I had a food team, culinary team, creating new kind of LTOs. So in many ways, it gave me a great kind of idea as to what life would be like when I came more over to the restaurant side a little bit later on. But in that sense, the spirit of entrepreneurship, which of course is central to everyone in the restaurant industry, really came through my kind of time working with franchisees, and especially those folks that would start from nothing and would build their business up. I think one of the greatest stories of America generally is the fact that you can build your dreams literally through the power of franchising. And I saw that come to life. Of course, franchising isn't easy. As a franchisor, you love working with the top 20% because they just move your business on. They really help you challenge to think about how the business is run, how the offer is coming to life. The bottom 10% often make your life a misery, but the journey always is trying to take that kind of middle 70% or so up a level or so. And that really came through in that period of time. But I left the C-store space. I left the C-store space in 2018. I wanted to get into more entrepreneurial circles myself. Probably haven't seen a lot of that come to life through franchising and the support of the franchise with AMPM. And really, for me, I kind of fell into it in many ways. I remember meeting Meredith, my co-author, who is the COO over at Kitchen United. And I was meeting her because she had left a huge organization in Yum Brands to go over to be one of the C-suites over at Kitchen United. And I wanted to speak to her about that journey between big company and small company and what it's like to go from something so large, multi-billion-dollar organization into something that was trying to make a profit. And she said, well, why don't you come and run operations for us here? And so I didn't really necessarily say, I'm going to go into ghost kitchens. That's my future. But I kind of fell upon it just on the chance meeting of a mutual friend introducing me to Meredith. And it was fantastic. The thing that really stood out for me was the fact that you have people in an entrepreneurial environment that are in a Series A kind of startup environment that just have this fervor, this excitement, this vibrancy for an idea, a principle of how to take an industry on to another level. And of course, ghost kitchens back then, of course, this was all pre-pandemic, weren't really known about. And so a lot of our day-to-day would be involved in speaking to executives across many of the big chains in the States, as well as independents, about this idea of growing off premise as something that was going to be very important for their business going forwards, and how the consumers were driving their desire for that. And it was tough, quite honestly, Troy. It was tough because, a lot of the executives had built their business on brick and mortar restaurateuring, and they hadn't necessarily seen the potential and perhaps the vibe for what their customers were after from an off-premise perspective. I mean, there was all the challenges associated with profitability from it, of course, but then also this piece around the level of change that would be required in their business. So I said to Meredith, why don't we buy our customers and our prospects a book? And she said, great, good idea. Let's go on our Amazon. Let's buy them all a book. We looked for such a book. It didn't exist. Now, fast forward, a year or so, and we basically we'd left Kitchen United, and Meredith and I went about writing the first book, which is this one here, Delivering the Digital Restaurants, Your Roadmap to the Future of Food. And the book came out in the summer of the lockdown, when every restaurant suddenly became a ghost kitchen. Every restaurant had to embrace digitization. And in that 6-month period leading up to it, where we'd interviewed, 100 or so restaurant executives, technology executives, about their perspectives on what was happening and why this was such an important change, it really gave me then this amazing kind of personal brand shift, if you will, to move from this C-store gas station leader into what I guess now I'm seen as a digital thought leader across the industry. The book went on to be an international bestseller. I spoke at a number of different conferences. That's how you and I met, of course. And then last year, actually, no, it wasn't last year, it was 2023, it came out the second book, which was more the how to the first book's why. And that's this one here, which is called Your Pathway to Digital Maturity. The whole idea of these books was to help independents, help restaurateurs see why they should be excited about it. That whole then led me on to a bunch of advisory roles, both in restaurant technology companies. I sit on the board of a restaurant group in Saudi Arabia, which is fascinating just to see that other perspective of an operating business dealing with a lot of these challenges, again, in a different market internationally. Also led me to meet my co-founders over at Juicer, which was a dynamic pricing company that I was working with for a couple of years. And now, of course, I'm at Invisible in the world of AI and helping restaurants and restaurant technology companies really embrace the way in which AI is going to change the industry again, much like I talked about only a few years before.
Carl, great. Thanks for the sort of walk through the history so we have some context. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of experience to call on. Let me start back sort of at that first book mindset, which is no matter where you are in the restaurant industry, you're being impacted and you're being pressured to adopt technology. And it's a really daunting task. I don't care if you have a CTO, CIO or not. It's a tremendous task. And if you're a legacy business, it's even worse because you're trying to find something to replace what you have and accelerate and expand your brand. But if you're a small independent or emerging brand, you really have to be thoughtful about what those investments are because of the impact, the new impact on the cost basis. But you also have to be made to understand what the efficiencies and opportunities that are being brought to you by those technologies, if they're implemented correctly and you pick the right things. But at the end of the day, I've spent about the last 4 years demoing every piece of technology on in the industry as fast as I can, many of them many times over to see the updates, just to try to have a baseline understanding. And it worked out in some ways that, it put me in a position to have some familiarity when I came to Pepper Lunch and had to build the global tech stack. And we are rolling out the global tech stack globally now. Asia's ahead of us actually in getting it implemented. But, it is a big, big thing to bite off. Tell us a little bit about how to take this on. If you're, no matter who you are in the business, you're an executive, you're a leader, you're an owner, an operator, and you're like, gosh, I have got to get caught up. What's the next thing? And everybody's looking for the next shiny object, but there's really there's a foundation to be built here. There's a strategy to be thought about. And I think you have some good ideas around that.
Well, you're right. The first thing is it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think the part of the challenge through the pandemic was everyone just threw stuff at the wall and just saw what stuck. And a lot of the things that they were trying to embrace, they just weren't ready for. Quite honestly, that's why we wrote the second book. It's like, well, guys, slow down. You don't need everything overnight. You actually need to focus on the core fundamentals. Part of the challenge is, Troy, is that the average restaurant group is somewhere between 15 to 20 different pieces of technology. And the challenge that is compounded because of that is that those pieces of technology don't talk to each other particularly well, which therefore creates a whole level of data inertia within the business, which creates a lot of inefficiencies, right? And so part of the complexity comes from being able to figure out, well, which tech works with which other piece of tech, and trying to get a clear story from that. And it's not easy. It's not easy by any way, shape, or means. And I think the way in which the second book ends is where we say, look, there's probably going to be a means by which we're going to see more consolidation. It's already happening this year, right? We've already seen many, many different acquisitions happen. And that kind of coming together, which is going to make the world for independence a lot easier. The challenge with a lot of that is you're also trying to figure out, well, which piece of software, which piece of SaaS, which kind of capability do I really need to excel in? If I'm making a choice of a consolidated suite of different services, what is the most important to me? Is the loyalty component the most important, or is the employee scheduling the most important part, right? And if you're having to make that choice between then two different vertically integrated or consolidated platforms, that's, I think, the real challenge for a lot of operators to try and figure out. It's why I think, again, the franchise piece is kind of so important, right? In the sense of you can learn from lessons that have already been learned, right? The journey that you've had to be on yourself has meant that those others that are now looking to you for guidance don't have to go through those same steps. They can look to you for your kind of guidance in that space. And that, of course, then helps, because the more the brand operates under one platform, the more it's easier then for that brand to flourish as well, especially when you take things like customer data into account.
Yeah, and to your point of that, the brand takes on development and implementation costs and time as well. We work on this ahead of the fact, and we get that semi-customer customization done for you at the store level. And that's not cheap, right? We're talking about some very significant investments that have to be made, and time and effort, right? That's something that has to be shepherded over time to develop those tools. And some of that might be integration. We really, really like a piece of technology, but it doesn't actually natively integrate into the existing tech stack that we're building. So we have to decide whether that's a value add worthy of the effort, right? And so to your point on the franchise side, those are investments of time and energy and money that are being made by the franchisor that literally could not be bore by even a small chain or an emerging brand that's building itself. So we cannot talk about technology today of any kind without every single one of these SaaS products, softwares, service model businesses talking about the effects of AI. And you've decided to join a company called Invisible Technologies that is trying to make AI technology applicable and accessible to brands. So in that vein, let's talk about that company also, but let's also talk about the buzzword of AI, what's really AI and what's really sort of not, what's an automated processing versus AI. But I want to get your take on how, when, and where you think this is going to affect the industry. Give us some real world examples. Educate the audience a little bit about what really AI is and is not.
You're so right. Like, AI is such an overused term right now. I kid you not. On the pitches that we're doing on a daily basis, I try to avoid using it because most people, their eyes glaze over or their ears start to clog up a little bit because it's like everyone is saying, oh, it's AI this and AI that. There was an advert done I saw from Fiverr, the outsourcing company, that said, no one cares about whether you're using AI or not, which I think is so true. It's weird in a way, right? Because AI has been around for decades. Machine learning, most of the platforms and technologies that we were just talking about are using AI in some way, shape, or form. It's really been these last 3 years or so where generative AI, the chat GPTs, the Geminis of this world, have come to the fore, which has really exploded this whole area of opportunity. Now, my company Invisible has been around for 9 years. We're a bit of a rocket ship of growth. A couple of years ago, we did 100 million. We did close to 200 million this year. And so it's great to see a company growing in that way and supporting it. And the company's grown largely by training a lot of these large language models, the models like a chat GPT, in the background and supporting the likes of OpenAI and Google and many of the other big technology companies out there. So we're uniquely positioned to be able to see not only how Gen AI has developed, but also where it is headed. And of course, that is the big debate right now, right? Where is this taking us? Where is this capability going to lead to in the years ahead? And actually, should we be fearful for our jobs? What does this mean for our future? How is society going to run? All those big questions are coming to the fore in this environment. And why is that? Because, maybe most people will look upon a chat GPT and say, that's kind of neat. I can ask a few questions, and it's kind of like an advanced search engine. And I think it does come back to this point around automation and the ability for you to almost say, well, if I can train a model to learn a piece of data and that data to then be overlapped against other pieces of data, and it can then undertake that particular thought process for me, then that's really interesting. But today, of course, as we interact with AI, we're typing a prompt. We're typing a prompt in to give us some information back, or putting a bit of, put a draft email in and say, spruce it up a bit. And so it comes back in a grammatically fine format with an appropriate empathy tone to it, if you will. But the way things are heading, Troy, is that it's going to basically do a lot of these things for us without us needing to do the prompt, without us needing to think about that. So the way we're trying to build the business right now, and I lead this function in the food, hospitality, retail area of our intelligent operations field, which is helping companies like DoorDash, Grubhub, Bolt over in Europe. We've had customers like in South America, like Rappi, folks that are very much central to the marketplace environment and the restaurant technology environment. And now we're even speaking to restaurants as well. In being able to say, well, where are the processes that exist today where perhaps either you have a speed problem, cost problem, or a quality problem? DoorDash came to us 4 years or so ago and they had the pandemic, right? And they were on board in all these restaurants. And suddenly, because of the pandemic, they had thousands coming on. And they just did not have the systems in place to be able to onboard those restaurants as quickly as they'd want. So we're taking those PDF menus, sometimes, menus written on the back of a napkin in a foreign language, and taking them and translating them and transforming them into the format that works right on the DoorDash platform. Similarly, we're doing other things associated to beverage optimization rates, where we're trying to determine whether the right picture of a bottle of Coke or a bottle of Pepsi is appearing in the right way on a restaurant's website, or the description, and being able to fix that. Because when you do that, you can actually see a 15% level of improvement on the beverage attachment rate, which of course is a high margin item, and every penny counts in this space. So it's those kind of areas. But then it's also something that doesn't get talked about a lot. You and I sit on these conference stages, and oftentimes they'll talk about robotic arms and the latest pizza making vending machine. But it's actually in the dull stuff that AI is coming to the fore. It's in the stuff that actually people don't really want to do. And here's the way I'm framing it for restaurants. When we think about probably the most sustained challenge that's affected our industry for many, many years, it's in labor. Right? You're often talking yourself, I see on social media, about minimum wage and the impacts of a lot of the effects, especially here in California. Well, 79% was the number in 2023. Sorry, 2023 was the labor turnover number, 79% across the industry. And when you factor into that the cost of a individual employee's turnover being $5,000 to $7,000, that's an incredible level of strain and inefficiency in our system today. And of course, we all felt that through the pandemic, especially. And yes, it's recovered a bit, but it's still a terrible number. And so then you ask yourself, well, why doesn't a Chick-fil-A have that type of problem? And most people, I think, when you ask those that are in the Chick-fil-A system, will say it's because of their unique model of how they operate, in the sense that they ensure their owners are actually located and working in the Chick-fil-A, right? And that they don't have all these other ventures that they're working around. And that idea of them being central and working in that space means they have more time with their people. You might be wondering where I'm taking this. And let me explain. My question to operators today is, well, what's keeping the GM in the office? What are the things that are keeping them in the office? Scheduling, inventory ordering, moving bits of data from different systems. We're going back to all that data entanglement that we talked about. All those things are keeping them away from coaching their team, being in front of the team, being in front of their guests, creating a great guest experience. And so therefore, the question is, well, what can we do to keep the GM out of the office? And that is where AI comes back into the fore. How can you bring automation into those types of processes that ultimately was going to help them be able to get their GMs out of the office in front of their people, and maybe just by doing that, being able to address something like turnover rate? Does that help?
Absolutely. In theory, for most people, the question is, practically now, a lot of the systems we already use or might be adopting in our businesses are starting to include some sort of AI tool within it, right? Some sort of embedded tool. But as you think about the future of the industry, how will AI affect the tech stack? Or will the tech stack get smaller? Will it just all have AI in it? I'm with you on the whole operating system. I think holistic operating systems are the future. I think this consolidation, I think a lot of companies in this business are products, tools that could be embedded rather than companies. And I tell some of them that, whether they like to hear it or not. And it's great because all that energy and effort went into building something very robust rather than a feature that never gets all the attention it deserves. But I think that consolidation and that holistic operating system mindset is going to come back around, which is where we started. I mean, we started with Micros and NCR Aloha, which were really point of sales with some other robust features. I think we've come so far beyond that. But, the tech stack today, when you pay $99 to $199 a month times 24 products, it's 2 to 3% of your gross sales are going to your technology stack. That may not be sustainable for a lot of businesses. So where do you think this is going? What does it look like 3 years from now? The effects of AI on the restaurant business specifically, the maturity of it. How does this play out in a couple of years?
Yeah, well, in the path to digital maturity, in the last chapter, we talk about this idea of the tech stack evolving to, yes, the vertically integrated platform, like you just mentioned. And there probably being three core pillars: the POS, the CRM and the ERP, so the customer data set, and then also the enterprise resource planning software that manages a lot of the back of house things. Those three pillars, I think, are necessary for each restaurant group. So there's definitely going to be a need for those to exist. The challenge then is the ancillary pieces of software. Like you say, the small little SaaS monthly fees that add up in time. And here's the thing, is that, if you and I were going around the shopping halls of restaurant technology conferences right now, Troy, and we're saying, okay, Carl, I'm looking for something for Pepper Lunch here on this kind of space. No matter how good a service or solution it would be, you're going to have to adapt your business around whatever that ancillary software is, right? It's going to say, well, we can do most of the things that you're after, Troy, but on this area here, you're going to have to do this little piece to be able to make it fit into my business. That just seems wrong to me. So for me, what I think we're going to end up is, and this kind of comes to answer your question about how AI is, if you understand the process that you want to have undertaken, and you say, well, this is how I want each of my guests to be treated in terms of, I don't know, an email marketing campaign, right? Or a text message campaign of some kind. This is how I want it to happen on the terms that I think are most appropriate, at the right type of frequency that I think is most appropriate. Based on what you've learned through working with many of these ancillary providers in the past, then AI can basically take that process on and do it for you. So rather than you having to shape your business around the software that you're procuring, you're now saying, what do I want to have happen? And how can AI and the process that makes sense for me to actually do it for me? That therefore makes it far more proprietary, because all of these platforms that are off the shelf are doing the same type of thing for every restaurant group.
Yeah, and I think one of the opportunities when we think about all of these AI agents and software tools having access to restaurant over the next 3 to 5 years, that I'm looking forward to, and I hope really is part of the roadmap of development, is going to go from the asking questions to being given suggestions. And what I mean by that is this: many restaurant operators know what they know really well, and they often know some of what they don't know. Some of the things they don't know, they don't know, but do they have the time and ability to really dig in and become experts in those areas of their business? Very commonly, financial is one of them, right? Or reporting, really understanding how to mine their data and have that data tell them what to do. I really look forward to a day where I have an AI agent built for my business that has access not just to a large language model that Google built, but to a language model or a data set of a lot of restaurants like me or different that can just tell me, hey, I looked at the data. You should know this, and you should do this because of that, right? It'd be like having an additional employee, right? Whether that acts like a CFO in that moment, it acts like a marketing a CMO in the moment, et cetera. A companion to my business that will give me best practices based on what it sees I'm doing. Hey, you're not being as efficient in your labor scheduling as you could. Here's a suggested schedule based on your historical sales that you should consider adopting. Boom, done
Totally.
for me, right? The collective mind versus the singular mind, right? Do you see that coming? Do you think that there's going to be the siloing of data and IP, or do you see a world where we can start to sort of crowdsource the AI learning specific to our industry?
I think you've got it perfectly there. I think the ability to make more informed decisions is ultimately how AI is going to help each of us run better businesses. The piece that I think I'd add onto it that is only really started to surface now is in the multimodality aspect of data. So yes, you could understand it from the standpoint of data points out of your POS, but now imagine cameras overlooking your make line. Now imagine the ability for you to be able to spot accuracy errors as they're happening, identifying the specific employees that are actually making those errors, and then being able to translate that into then corrective behaviors directed to that employee in their language of choice in their training program that's dealt with in the following week, right? This ability to be able to identify and address and have a more productive manner of being able to train employees in the right framework and in the language that they're after utilizing both video and audio capabilities. That I think is really quite exciting. I haven't seen a huge amount yet on taste and smell, but I'm sure it's in the works.
Well, look, at Pepper Lunch, if it can tell whether they picked up the right shaker and they shook it the right amount of times over the right portion of the plate, that'd be helpful because that's very critical to the flavor of our food. All right, use the word excite there. I have a question. What excites you and conversely concerns you for the restaurant industry, independent, multi-unit, enterprise, doesn't matter, specifically related to the ecosystem or the confusion around the technology stack ecosystem? What excites you? That there's going to be easier discovery, or what concerns you that we're just going to keep having 10,000 technology? FS Tech's going to become the largest conference in the country because everybody's got a AI agent company out there. Like, what is the horizon for the restaurateur, and what are you excited about, or what are you concerned about?
What excites me is the technology game, as it's become increasingly SaaSified, has evened the playing fields. So it's allowed the smaller players to be able to have capabilities in ways that they would not have dreamed of only a few short years ago. So that's incredible. The piece that's also incredible is then seeing some of the folks that are coming through the system today that perhaps haven't had much experience in restaurateuring, but don't have a playbook to operate from, and therefore are redesigning the business model and are rethinking about, well, actually, with this capability, with this SaaSified levels of technology that I'm now able to access, I can run a completely different type of business that actually has far more potential and opportunity about it than trying to adapt. Conversely, to the second part of your question about concerning, I'm concerned about the mindset of a lot of the leading restaurant executives out there that aren't moving at the pace they need to move to, because they're doing things in perhaps the ways they've always done them. Now, look, I used to run a huge chain myself, so I know how difficult it is to move a cruise ship at only a few degrees. And so it does take time for sure. But the challenge with that is also then the opportunity for the smaller guys, right? The opportunity is for them to be able to utilize these capabilities in such a way that allows them to be able to harness an even greater guest experience. And the way I often frame this is, coming back to your very first question about hospitality and digital hospitality in particular, is you think back to your most favorite experience ever in a restaurant. Most of us will probably say it's in an independent. And again, why? Because they treated us like they knew us. And typically the server was particularly good. They treated us in a way that made them, we felt known as such. Maybe they remembered which bottle of wine that we had last time we visited, that type of experience. Well, you take that, you pocket that and say, now that everything is a data point, all of those information points around when I last visited, what bottle of wine I ordered typically, that can now be extended to every guest for every occasion. And so if we can get to a world whereby we can build a business model that is more profitable and build an experience that enables the team to have information about every guest, that creates that type of experience that we all value so highly, that's something to be incredibly excited about, right? The thing that concerns me is that there's a lot of the bigger chains out there that aren't moving fast enough to be able to accommodate that. But guess what? That's going to leave room for the smaller guys to make an impact.
There's a lot of TGI Fridays real estate coming available for that exact reason. And look, hate to say it, hate to be that guy. Maybe Red Lobster saves itself, maybe it doesn't. Hooters has been for sale for, you can pick it up, Hooters as a brand for sale for under $10 million, but it has $390 million in debt. So that really, it's the Sears Kmart story of the day in the restaurant industry. And I think we're seeing it and more in the restaurant industry. And you say, oh, well, there's so many reasons. Well, then tell me why Texas Roadhouse is putting up high double-digit growth year over year, quarter over quarter. They're a large format, full service, family, casual restaurant too. Why are they growing? Why are they exploding? Why are they doing so good? One reason is that they responded in the pandemic and digitized and were ready to adapt themselves. I'll say it's funny, as you were talking, you kind of made the point I was going to make around the excitement. I spend a specific amount of effort getting myself around young, small brand operators, whether it's the regional, smaller franchise or restaurant shows, or Restaurantology is a great example, and one-day event that Savory puts on in Utah every year, because it's just filled with a bunch of 5 to 15 store. There's a couple 50, 100 store groups there, but it's mostly these smaller independent groups that are trying to grow it their own way. And one of the reasons I do that is it's just exciting as heck to see what it is they focus on, how they do it, the way they look at their business differently, mostly generationally driven, but they're also more technologically native. And so the stuff just comes easier and they kind of are able to implement better. But it's also to help educate. Look, I'm almost 50 years old, despite Sean Walchef's advertisement that I turned 50. I turned 49 recently. But, I don't want to be that old corporate 500 store guy that moves slowly and isn't connected to the reality on the ground, right? And so I think, to your point, I'm excited about this next generation, these new generations of founders and brands that are coming to light. And there's hundreds of them. We know there's at least 700 of them because Savory talked to 700 groups in the last 2 or 3 years. So there's at least 700 of these 5 to 15 store groups out there. And it's just so interesting to see the next generation. So to your point, legacy companies that don't adapt, move, evolve, the natural thing that happens in life happens. They will die and they will be replaced. They will make room for the next generation of digitally native, probably AI native, potentially robotically native brands. But on the full service, fine dining, casual dining, we're seeing a return to hospitality, which brings this story full circle, as a lot of folks are really talking about how to humanize this. And I think AI is actually going to help humanize technology more than the buttons and the apps and the convenient geofencing ordering that can occur today. I think AI is going to personalize it and make it feel more humanistic. What are your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think the more we can get humans into creating the hospitality experience that we all desire, the better, which means we need to find ways to allow humans to not do the things that perhaps they aren't as best situated to do. It comes back to that getting the GM out of the office kind of angle. Same idea with what we're seeing. 2024, the biggest tech investment was in voice AI and kiosks at the front of restaurants, right? What are those two things doing? That wasn't necessarily saving on labor. That was allowing labor to be deployed in better ways to be able to create a better guest experience.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Carl, we always end these shows with a few fun questions. Having spent a lot of time in Japan myself, of course, and you just went for the very first time, I'm very excited to hear about your experience. Give me a quick highlight about hospitality in Japan, whatever that means to you. Tell me about how you experienced hospitality specifically in Japan.
Well, first of all, Japan has the highest amount of restaurants per capita in the world, right? The US is second in that list. 1.5 million restaurants. I know you're going to give me some jip in a moment about not going to see a pepper lunch, but the reality is I couldn't get through them all. I couldn't get through all these restaurants, but the food was amazing generally across so many different food types. The thing that really blew my mind a little bit was, you think of Japan and you think of, I don't know, a Honda factory and Kaizen lean manufacturing processes. And in a way, I went into the restaurants and I thought, this isn't as efficient as it should be. It's not as slick as I was expecting. There were times where I'd have to go up to a vending machine, get a ticket, take the ticket to the kitchen. The kitchen would take the ticket. They'd give me a buzzer. I have to go and collect my food at the buzzer. It was quite a convoluted experience for me. And you then take it to some of the other environments where you're in a very small omakase, 8 seats, and they do that maybe once or twice a night. And you're thinking, wow, how do these places survive? Well, I think they survive because they have a very small amount of team. They put a lot of energy and investment into the food, and they create a great experience. And it's almost like they're running restaurants not because they're trying to be commercially savvy. They're running restaurants because they want to create a great experience. And my goodness, did I have some great experiences there.
Absolutely true. It's not being optimized for EBITDA, right? It's just not the purpose of it. If they were, there wouldn't be as many as there are. So the last 2 times I've been to Japan, I made it a point to go out of my way. I do this thing. I stay now at a local business hotel near our offices, and I wander the back alleys. This is something most people don't know. If you go down the busy main streets, you're going to get the classic large brands and the sort of repeated commercial experience that you might get on Main Street, big market streets in the US. But in Japan, unlike many places, dark, narrow back alleys is where the food really is. And I've made it a point to wander those alleys, purchase by picture or we'll look through the window and go, that place looks cool, and have no idea what they serve and just go in and order off the menu. So Carl, when you were in Japan, what was the best meal you had?
Oh, that's so difficult to answer because I had some amazing meals. I'm gonna answer it slightly differently. I'm gonna say the Tokyo Fish Market for breakfast. If you haven't been, you really should check it out next time you're in Japan. It's literally, like you say, a lot of these narrow side streets, skewers of Wagyu beef for $10. Crazy. I mean, the most stunning Wagyu beef I've ever had in my life. Nigiri with the fatty tuna on it, which was amazing. Having skewers of octopus being made fresh for you in a kind of teppanyaki style. It was amazing. I have to say that I love the ability to walk around an area and just try bits of food. It's almost like going around a mall food court, but on another level, right? And to be able to do that at the fish market was just great. Just remember to go early, otherwise the crowds will get annoyed.
Very early, yes. And by the way, you can just walk up to a guy with a basket on top of a box and get some of the best sushi in your life right there on the alleyway in the fish market for sure. All right, well, Carl, next time you go to Japan, please let me know in advance. Please allow me to introduce you to a couple of unknown, hidden, high quality master chef experiences. If you haven't, I tell the audience, sushi's easy to find. Other forms of common ramen's easy to find, and you can walk in anywhere and have great yakiniku, which is grilling over the open fire grill or coal grill, very easy to find. But there's some harder to find, and true omakase style teppanyaki, true master chef teppanyaki, not as easy to find really great versions of that. You have to be introduced and told where to go. Please let us tell you. And by the way, I have lots of friends there that love to host our friends when they come. So if you're headed to Japan, please let me know. We're going to get you some VIP introductory and hosting treatment at some of these really unique eateries. But I'll say this about the sushi game. The sushi in Haneda Airport is better than anything you'll ever have in the US. And I've been to some 5-star omakase, $500 per person places in the US. And you cannot get the quality. You can't get the craftsmanship. So absolutely love that you went and enjoyed that, and look forward to myself going back. Look forward to hearing about you going back sometime.
Looking forward to it as well. Hopefully together one day.
Hey, that would be amazing. Let's do that. Let's find a reason to make that happen. Well, Carl, thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure. Great conversation. I think it's been very enlightening. Thanks for bringing sort of your global view and your 100,000-foot oversight from all your experience to the audience. Talk a little bit about where people can find your book. Again, name the book. Talk about how they can find you. I know that you're available for speaking, whether it's to a brand, maybe at a franchise conference for a brand, or other association groups. Make sure people can find you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. The books are available on Amazon. You can have me read the books to you on Audible. Delivering the Digital Restaurant is the main name for both of them. The dark blue is the first book. That's the why. The light kind of green color is the second book, Path to Digital Maturity. That's more the how. If you already believe in the future digitization, obviously check out Invisible as well. Invisible Technologies. And would love to be able to speak to anyone that's interested in figuring out how they're trying to bring AI and automation into their business, drive efficiencies forwards. If you'd like me to come and speak at your conference, then head to thedigital.restaurant and you'll find out information about myself, the books, and Meredith there. And if you're bored with just listening to one podcast, The Pineapple Perspective, then also check out The Digital Restaurant. Meredith and I do that every couple of weeks, and we talk about the latest trends in restaurant technology as well.
I'm an avid listener. I look for the announcement and link to it on LinkedIn every time. Always very contemporary conversation about what's happening in the industry and how technology is a part of that. I would highly encourage people just subscribe to Carl and Meredith's show. Easy to follow them on LinkedIn and get those notifications. Very, very informative. And again, very topical of the day as they do it on a regular basis. Carl, thanks so much. Glad to have you, sir. Be well, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.